Paper terrorism? Paper terrorism? Are you kidding me? Paper terrorism? Thanks, Flathead. At the end, okay, at the end. Paper terrorism. I'm just blown away by the things our government gets away with. Now, we have these trials going on. There's these trials going on in Colorado right now, okay? Here's this sheriff back here. Let me grab the camera just for a second. These paper terrorism victims talk about indictments and prison sentences. Sheriff Joe Pell, right? He's the guy talking in this video, saying, I was a victim.
For millions and millions of dollars.
Now, what he's talking about is these guys, these kind of sovereign citizen types, in particular in Colorado. And if you don't know, there's trials going on right now. Bruce Doucette is on trial. He's facing like 60 years in prison, guys. He's getting railroaded in the courts, okay? Now, here's what these guys are doing. They go out and they're trying to get like common law grand juries going, which is a legitimate thing. When they say paper terrorism, what they mean is the people are getting together and they're filing charges against them, okay? Because people like Sheriff Joe Pell is a terrorist. He's a criminal. He should be arrested. So should the prosecutor. So should all of the cops roaming your street, extorting and robbing and murdering you. Okay? They should be arrested. But here's the problem. And I've talked about this before. I did a video like 2 years ago warning people about this because I said they're going to send you to prison. And now it's happening. What's happening is there's two sides of this. And I'm going to be really brief because I don't want to get into the sovereign thing too much. We defend liberty by standing up for it, not by filing magic papers in a court of treason. It doesn't work to go to the people who are abusing you and file a paper and say, stop abusing me. Okay? When these guys get together, and a common law grand jury is what a grand jury is supposed to be, okay? The people are supposed to be able to indict the sheriff and bring charges. And then since he's the sheriff, the people would have to form a posse, right? And somebody else would have to step in, but it has to be done right. You can't just go around willy-nilly arresting people. So what they're doing is they file these grand jury indictments against these criminals running our government. And in their basic sense, the concept has merit, right? But they take it further, because then when it's totally ignored, they start filing these liens for hundreds of millions of dollars against public officials, and they turn them over to collection agencies and all this stuff. So let's be clear, like these people that are getting railroaded in court, I don't think their tactics are the way to go. You can't just file a lien against someone and say they owe you a bunch of money when no due process has been given, okay? At that point, in a sense, you are making them the victim because you're saying they owe you something, but they were never given their day in court. On the other hand, the people are supposed to be able to form a grand jury and indict these people. What they're doing is they indict them. And then these sovereign types, they file liens against these public officials, okay? So they say, this is a frivolous, fraudulent lien that has no basis, and they bring them into court, right? And then they bring the indictments, and they say, look, they were threatening to arrest them, which is perfectly reasonable. Our public officials, like this treasonous sheriff back here who's letting people be locked away in prison for life, for nothing, he should be arrested. He should be removed from his position, all right? However, the crime is not significant. The indictment is what the people should be doing to our public officials. The bogus lien should simply be thrown out because it hasn't been given due process. What they're doing, though, is they turn around and they use this, and these prostitute news agencies turn around and they say, oh, yeah, these victims of the crime. And they make up terms like paper terrorism. So what they're doing, these guys in Colorado that have been doing this, and there's a lot of movements that are pushing this, some of them just got 20 to 40 years, you guys. They never lifted a finger against anybody. Now, were some of the papers and tactics they use kind of out there? Yes, but that's not relevant. At this point, they are the victims. They've been locked up in prison for years. They're sending them away for decades, you guys, as we all look on. And they say, the media, the people, oh, they're paper terrorists. Paper terrorists are the cops who are out here writing you tickets to appear in court. Paper terrorists are the judges signing off on your warrants. But they're not paper terrorists. They're real terrorists. Blue ISIS, every judge, every cop, every sheriff. They're real terrorists. They're terrorizing your families. They're tearing apart your families. They're stealing your children. They're locking your brothers and your fathers in prison. They are the terrorists. And I've said for so long, whatever they do to us, they will turn around. So they terrorize these victims who were desperate to get something done. So they tried tactics of legalese and paperwork. But what people and what the sovereign kind of movement isn't realizing is you can't beat terrorists in their turf by going and trying to pontificate, thanks Tyler, pontificate the legal vomit that they spew on us. The reason they succeed with their legal vomit from the bench is not because it's actual law or relevant or argument. It's because they have a gun to our head and they say, obey or we will kill you. That's why I left the USA, because I said, I will not tolerate this court. I will not tolerate having my phone stolen and then being forced to give up the password. I won't tolerate a kangaroo court, I said. And so I left because I knew I couldn't win by playing paper games with them. So the first warning here is, guys, I said 2 years ago, don't play these legal, sovereign paper games. And whenever somebody goes down for it, they say, oh, they just didn't do it right. We need to try a new tactic. It won't work. We have to stop showing up to these courts. We have to stop complying. We have to start shaming the blue ISIS in our community. And so Bruce Doucette now is on trial, right? And the people like this National Liberty Alliance, and they promote the indictment thing, which they are doing this stuff and they work together on it. Literally, 2 of the people that were in the National Liberty Alliance were in court this week. They were FBI agents who were setting Bruce Doucette up. And now he faces like 60 years in prison for nothing but filing papers, you guys. Are you seeing who the terrorists are? But it goes worse, and that's the second part of this conversation of how bad it is. We have to stop being idiots. The juries of the USA are the most ignorant, uninformed, and stupefied juries that the world has ever seen. And you need to stop allowing that. The jury does have a great deal of power. The jury is one of the few things the court has not gone after and started imprisoning yet when they don't comply. And it'll come. But right now, if you're on a jury, you can acquit. One person can say no, and you can. The jury nullification is real. But what's happening instead? We get these juries on there, and they're like, oh, police are heroes, and the government's good. And you know what happens in a jury? And this is why I wanted you guys to hear this, and I want you to share this tonight. When you go to a jury trial, most people get bullied into pleading out. When you get to a jury trial, the people who actually go to jury trial, about 96% of them are convicted. Do you know why? Because the jury never hears the evidence. The judge only allows the jury to hear what she or he and the prosecutor wants to hear for the most part. And if the defense tries to speak their mind or speak for themselves, the judge will silence them and send the jury out of the room for the discussion. The jury doesn't get to hear the evidence that's relevant. The jury doesn't get to know, you guys. The jury doesn't get to know how long of a sentence you're facing. So imagine this. Imagine someone comes to you and they're telling you a story about how their friend abused them, right? And they're like, oh yeah, they did this and this and this. And you're like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty bad. And you're only hearing one side of the story. And you say, well, that sounds pretty bad. And the person turns to you and says, well, do you think they're guilty? And you say, well, yeah, I guess so. I guess they're guilty. And the guy says, so they should be punished. And you're like, well, yeah, I guess so. And so then the person that was talking to you, they go out and they shoot the person, all right? And they say, oh, well, I took it to the jury, right? I took it to the jury and they told me I could. Joe here, he told me I could. And you say, wait a minute, I didn't say that. And you say, no, you said he was guilty, and so I exacted the punishment. That's how stupid our juries have become, you guys. If you're sitting in a jury, and a judge is saying, well, no, you don't get to hear that evidence. You don't get to hear that. you don't get to know what happens to the accused if they get convicted. You don't get to know what the punishment will be. We're just telling you this is what our law says, and that you need to only listen to what we say and not your conscience. This is what the judge is telling the juries in the courtroom. Have you ever gone and watched a jury trial? The judge actually makes the jury swear an oath to the judge to look at the law from the judge's perspective and set aside their conscience, guys. And so the jury, in their ignorance, they sit here and they listen to a prosecutor demonize and destroy and do whatever he wants, and the defense either gets shut down or they get a lawyer that plays the game because the lawyer's afraid of being disbarred, because if they get disbarred, they can't work anymore. Did you know in Mexico there's no bar requirement and anybody can represent you in court? Another topic, but the USA has no law. You go to court, the jury is set up, they get the stupidest jury they can find, and your only prayer is an appeal to heaven and a hope that one of those jurors snuck on the jury and he's awake enough to realize that every single trial is a scam, that none of the real evidence and facts and due process, and that no one in there is getting due process, and to say, I refuse, I will not convict, and hang the whole trial. Be that juror. Be that juror. Get on a jury and get in there. Don't say it in the jury questions. Don't act intelligent in the jury questions. Act like a government worshiping idiot if you want to get on the jury. And then once you hear the case and realize that it's BS and that no due process was served, because that's what's happening in every case, then you can say, no, these guys haven't presented a case. The case hasn't been heard. Due process hasn't been done. We don't even know what the punishment is going to be. The juries need to start turning to the judges and they say, what are you talking about? Of course we're not going to convict. Of course we're not going to convict if we don't even know what the ramifications will be on the accused. What is the matter with you? How did we get to this point? We've become so ignorant in government worship, we have to start thinking for ourselves. And so as people like the Bundys, Jason Patrick, Jake Ryan, Schaefer Cox, Jeff Winehouse, they're railroaded in court for doing good. And sometimes the outcry and the lies are so bad that the jury catches on to it, like they did in the Bundy trials. But a lot of the people that stood with the Bundys are still sitting in prison. Natives are sitting in prison. Leonard Peltier, Jeff Winehouse, all these guys, they're still sitting in prison. And there hasn't even been anyone hurt. The terrorists are your government. Be that juror. That's right, displaced. Awesome. Be that juror that says, no, your system is a lie, and I refuse to convict somebody who's been given a kangaroo court, which is every single one. I refuse to send somebody for a for-profit prison. Guys, at this point, it doesn't even matter what they're charged with. You have to assume they're innocent because no one is being given a fair trial. No one's being given a fair trial. And so as thugs like Sheriff Joe Pale and every Blue ISIS member across your nation take part in the railroading and filling of these for-profit prisons, and then they have the audacity to turn to people like Bruce Doucette, who's getting railroaded in court because maybe his tactics weren't the best, and send him to prison for 50 years. No one to get out, guys. The USA is done. The law is gone. I'm here to tell you, and I really believe that law will not be restored in the USA, if ever, until it crumbles to ashes. And I don't think most of us want to be there when that happens, because the USA, it's coming apart. There is no law. All right, so we've been going for a while. I'm going to wrap this up. I just want you to know what's going on. Go look up the case of these so-called paper terrorists in Colorado. The real terrorists are the prosecutors, the judges, and the police officers. And people have to start knowing that. We have to start shaming them. We have to start naming it. Are you guys wearing your Blue ISIS gear around the streets of the USA? Go get your Blue ISIS shirt. I made that graphic. Go check it out. bit.ly/Blue ISIS 2 is the short link. And go spread your Blue ISIS. At least use the hashtag. You don't have to buy a shirt, but use the hashtag. Start shaming these thugs. Start standing up. Start being the juror that says no. And stop buying into the media propaganda of they did something horrible. You have no idea if they did something horrible because the media doesn't tell the truth. And they never got due process. Awesome White Mage. Hey, you guys tag me on Twitter or Facebook with photos of your Blue ISIS gear. Hashtag Blue ISIS, and I'll be watching for it, okay? All right.